For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On September 18, 1990, 12-year-old Tommy Brennan vanished without a trace after soccer practice at Riverside Middle School in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. The 7th grader had been walking to his mother's car in the school parking lot when he disappeared, leaving behind only his soccer cleats and a mystery that would haunt the small suburban community for years. Despite an extensive investigation involving local police, the FBI, and hundreds of volunteers, no trace of Tommy was ever found. The case became one of New Jersey's most baffling missing child mysteries, with investigators pursuing countless leads that led nowhere and theories that couldn't be proven. For 5 years, Tommy's disappearance remained unsolved, gradually fading from daily headlines but never from the minds of those who knew him. Then, in October 1995, Coach William Peterson was conducting a routine cleaning of the school's athletic facilities when he made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the questions that had plagued the community for half a decade. Hidden in a forgotten corner of the school's basement, Peterson found a maintenance locker that had been sealed and untouched since 1990. Inside, he would uncover evidence that would not only solve Tommy Brennan's disappearance but would also expose a truth that was far closer to home than anyone had ever imagined. This is the complete investigation into Tommy Brennan's disappearance, from the frantic search efforts of 1990 to the shocking revelation that would emerge from a locker that had been hiding its secrets for 5 long years. Chapter 1. After practice. September 18, 1990 was a crisp autumn afternoon at Riverside Middle School in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. The leaves were just beginning to change colors, and the weather was perfect for outdoor sports. For 12-year-old Tommy Brennan, it was a typical Tuesday filled with classes and ending with soccer practice for the school's 7th grade team. Tommy was a popular student who excelled both academically and athletically. The 7th grader maintained an A average while playing on the soccer team and participating in the school's debate club. His teachers described him as responsible, friendly, and mature for his age. The Brennan family had lived in Cedar Grove for 8 years, having moved there when Tommy was 4 years old. His father, Patrick Brennan, worked as an accountant for a firm in nearby Newark, while his mother, Linda Brennan, was a part-time librarian at the local public library. Tommy also had a younger sister, Megan, who was 9 years old. Soccer practice that day had been routine, according to Coach William Peterson's later testimony. The team had worked on defensive drills and scrimmaged for about an hour before Peterson dismissed the players at 4:30 p.m. Tommy had seemed his usual energetic self during practice and had shown no signs of distress or unusual behavior. After practice, Tommy had followed his normal routine of changing out of his cleats and gathering his equipment. His mother, Linda, was scheduled to pick him up at 4:45 p.m., as she did every Tuesday and Thursday after soccer practice. Tommy knew to wait for her in the main parking lot near the school's front entrance. According to witness testimony, Tommy had left the locker room around 4:35 p.m., carrying his soccer bag and wearing his regular shoes. Several teammates saw him walking toward the parking lot, and he had waved goodbye to friends who were being picked up by their own parents. Linda Brennan arrived at the school parking lot at 4:42 p.m., slightly earlier than usual. She parked in her regular spot near the main entrance and expected to see Tommy waiting for her, as he always did. However, when she looked around the parking lot, she didn't see her son anywhere. Initially, Linda assumed that Tommy might still be in the locker room finishing up or talking with his coach. She waited in her car for about 10 minutes, expecting him to appear at any moment. When he didn't show up by 5 p.m., she decided to go into the school to look for him. Linda's first stop was the athletic office, where she found Coach Peterson finishing up some paperwork. When she asked about Tommy, Peterson told her that practice had ended about 25 minutes earlier and that Tommy had left with the other players. Peterson seemed surprised that Tommy wasn't in the parking lot. Together, Linda and Coach Peterson checked the locker room, the gymnasium, and other areas where Tommy might have gone. They found Tommy's soccer cleats in his assigned locker, but his street shoes, backpack, and soccer bag were missing, suggesting that he had indeed left the building as planned. Growing concerned, Linda and Coach Peterson expanded their search to include the entire school building. They checked classrooms, the library, the cafeteria, and even maintenance areas, calling Tommy's name and hoping to hear a response. The school was largely empty except for a few teachers and custodial staff. At 5:30 p.m., after nearly an hour of searching, Linda Brennan called the Cedar Grove Police Department to report her son missing. The call was received by Officer Michael Romano, who immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and dispatched units to the school. Officer Romano arrived at Riverside Middle School at 5:45 p.m. and began interviewing Linda Brennan and Coach Peterson about Tommy's activities and last known whereabouts. Romano's initial concern was that Tommy might have left the school grounds voluntarily, perhaps to walk home or visit a friend. However, Linda quickly explained that Tommy would never leave without permission and had never failed to meet her for pickup. She also noted that Tommy didn't have any close friends who lived within walking distance of the school, making it unlikely that he would have gone to visit someone. The initial search of the school grounds began immediately, with Officer Romano, Linda Brennan, and Coach Peterson systematically checking every area where a 12-year-old boy might go. They searched behind buildings, in wooded areas adjacent to the school, and in the athletic fields where Tommy might have decided to practice on his own. By 6:30 p.m., additional police units had arrived at the school, and the search had expanded to include a wider area around the campus. Officers checked nearby streets, parks, and businesses, asking if anyone had seen a boy matching Tommy's description. The Cedar Grove Police Department also contacted Tommy's father at work and his sister at her after-school program. Patrick Brennan immediately left his office to join the search, while Megan was taken to her grandmother's house to wait for news about her brother. As evening approached and Tommy had been missing for over 2 hours, the investigation took on a more serious tone. The fact that Tommy had last been seen at school, in a controlled environment, suggested that his disappearance was not a simple case of a child wandering off or losing track of time. Officer Romano contacted the New Jersey State Police and the FBI to report the missing child case. While it was too early to assume that Tommy had been abducted, the circumstances of his disappearance warranted immediate attention from specialized investigators. By nightfall on September 18th, Tommy Brennan had been missing for nearly 4 hours. The initial search had covered the entire school campus and surrounding area without finding any trace of the 12-year-old boy. The investigation was about to expand into one of the largest missing child operations in Cedar Grove's history. The mystery of Tommy's disappearance was particularly puzzling because he had vanished from a secure, familiar environment while following his normal routine. Something had interrupted Tommy's walk from the school building to his mother's car, and that something had left no obvious clues about what had happened or where he had gone. Chapter 2. The search intensifies. The search for Tommy Brennan escalated dramatically on September 19, 1990, as law enforcement agencies throughout New Jersey mobilized to find the missing 12-year-old. The case had all the hallmarks of a child abduction, given Tommy's responsible nature and the secure environment from which he had vanished. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell of the Cedar Grove Police Department was assigned as the lead investigator. With 12 years of experience in missing person cases, Mitchell immediately recognized that time was critical in finding Tommy, especially if he had been abducted by someone with malicious intent. The investigation began with extensive interviews of everyone who had been at Riverside Middle School on September 18th. This included Tommy's teammates, coaching staff, teachers, administrative personnel, and custodial workers. Mitchell was looking for anyone who might have seen Tommy after practice or noticed anything unusual around the school. The interviews revealed that Tommy had been seen by multiple witnesses walking toward the parking lot after practice, but no one had observed him actually reaching his mother's car or leaving the school grounds. The timeline showed a gap of approximately 10 minutes during which Tommy had simply vanished. Mitchell also interviewed Tommy's classmates and friends to determine if he had mentioned any plans to go somewhere other than home, or if he had seemed worried or upset about anything. However, everyone described Tommy as being his normal, happy self with no apparent concerns or problems. The physical search expanded to include specialized resources from the New Jersey State Police. Search and rescue teams with tracking dogs arrived at the school on September 19th and began systematic coverage of all areas within a 5-mile radius of Riverside Middle School. The search dogs were given items of Tommy's clothing to establish his scent, then taken to various locations around the school where he was known to have been. The dogs picked up Tommy's scent in the locker room and followed it toward the parking lot, but the trail became confused in the area where multiple vehicles had been parked. One concerning aspect of the dog search was that Tommy's scent trail seemed to end abruptly in the parking lot area, suggesting that he might have gotten into a vehicle. This supported the theory that Tommy had been abducted rather than having wandered away on foot. The FBI joined the investigation on September 20th, bringing federal resources and expertise in child abduction cases. Special Agent David Kim was assigned as the federal lead investigator and immediately began coordinating with local authorities to expand the scope of the investigation. Agent Kim's first priority was to investigate the possibility that Tommy had been abducted by someone known to him. Statistics showed that most child abductions were committed by family members, acquaintances, or individuals who had previous contact with the victim. The investigation revealed that Tommy had a normal, stable family life with no apparent conflicts or problems. His parents' marriage was solid, there were no custody disputes, and no family members had concerning backgrounds or behaviors. This suggested that if Tommy had been abducted, it was likely by someone outside his immediate family circle. However, investigators did identify several individuals who had regular contact with Tommy and warranted closer examination. These included school staff members, coaches, and volunteers who worked with the soccer program and other school activities. One person who attracted investigators' attention was Frank Carlson, a 45-year-old maintenance worker who had been employed by the Cedar Grove School District for 3 years. Carlson had been working at Riverside Middle School on September 18th and had access to all areas of the campus. Carlson's background check revealed that he had been fired from a previous job for inappropriate behavior around children, though he had never been charged with any crimes. The discovery of this information made him a person of interest in Tommy's disappearance. When questioned by investigators, Carlson claimed that he had been working in the school's basement maintenance areas during the time Tommy disappeared and had not seen the boy or noticed anything unusual. However, his alibi was difficult to verify because he had been working alone. The investigation of school personnel also revealed some concerning gaps in the district's background check procedures. Several employees had been hired without thorough screening, and some had access to areas of the school where they could potentially encounter children unsupervised. Meanwhile, the search for Tommy continued with increasing urgency. Volunteers from throughout Cedar Grove and surrounding communities joined the effort, with hundreds of people searching wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and any location where a child might be hidden or held. The case received extensive media coverage throughout New Jersey and the New York metropolitan area. Tommy's photograph was distributed to law enforcement agencies across the region, and the story was featured on local television news programs and in newspapers. The media attention generated numerous tips from the public, with people reporting sightings of boys who resembled Tommy in various locations. However, most of these tips proved to be false alarms or cases of mistaken identity when investigated by law enforcement. One tip that seemed particularly promising came from a motorist who reported seeing a boy matching Tommy's description getting into a dark-colored van in the Riverside Middle School parking lot on September 18th. The witness claimed the sighting had occurred around 4:40 p.m., which would fit the timeline of Tommy's disappearance. However, when investigators interviewed the witness more extensively, the person admitted that they couldn't be certain of the date or time of the sighting and might have confused it with an incident from a different day. The lead ultimately proved to be unreliable. As September 1990 came to an end, Tommy Brennan had been missing for nearly 2 weeks without any confirmed sightings or physical evidence. The massive search effort had covered hundreds of square miles and involved thousands of hours of volunteer time, but had produced no concrete leads about Tommy's whereabouts. The investigation continued with reduced intensity as the initial urgency gave way to the grim reality that Tommy might not be found quickly. Detective Mitchell and FBI agent Kim continued to pursue leads and review evidence, but the case was beginning to take on the characteristics of a long-term missing person investigation. For the Brennan family, the transition from active search to ongoing investigation was heartbreaking. They had to accept that their daily lives would continue without knowing what had happened to their son, while never giving up hope that he might somehow still be alive and would eventually be found. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 3: Years of Uncertainty. The years following Tommy Brennan's disappearance were marked by persistent effort from his family and law enforcement to keep the case alive, despite the gradual fading of public attention and the accumulation of false leads that led nowhere. Patrick and Linda Brennan became tireless advocates for their missing son, establishing a foundation to support other families of missing children and working to keep Tommy's case in the public consciousness. They appeared on television programs, gave interviews to newspapers, and distributed thousands of flyers throughout New Jersey and surrounding states. The couple also hired private investigator Margaret Walsh in 1991 to continue searching for Tommy when it became clear that the official investigation had exhausted its immediate leads. Walsh brought fresh perspective to the case and had extensive contacts throughout the law enforcement community. Walsh's investigation focused on the possibility that Tommy had been abducted by someone involved in child trafficking, a problem that law enforcement was beginning to recognize as more widespread than previously understood. However, this line of investigation required extensive resources and coordination that was difficult to sustain over time. Throughout 1991 and 1992, Detective Mitchell continued to review Tommy's case file regularly, looking for any connections to similar cases in other jurisdictions. She maintained contact with the FBI and participated in task forces focused on missing children cases throughout the Northeast. One potentially significant development occurred in 1992 when a child's skeletal remains were discovered in a wooded area about 20 miles from Cedar Grove. The remains were initially thought to possibly be Tommy's, but forensic analysis revealed that they belonged to a different child who had been missing for several years. The false alarm was emotionally devastating for the Brennan family, who had prepared themselves for the worst possible news. However, it also demonstrated that the investigation remained active and that any potential evidence would be thoroughly examined. In 1993, 3 years after Tommy's disappearance, the case was featured on the television show Unsolved Mysteries. The program included interviews with Tommy's family, investigators involved in the case, and experts in missing children investigations. The television exposure generated hundreds of tips from viewers across the country, but most followed the pattern of previous leads, reported sightings that couldn't be confirmed or theories that lacked supporting evidence. However, the show did succeed in keeping Tommy's case in the national consciousness. One tip that seemed particularly credible came from a woman in Pennsylvania who reported seeing a boy matching Tommy's description at a shopping mall in 1991. The witness provided specific details about the boy's appearance and behavior that seemed to match Tommy's characteristics. Investigators traveled to Pennsylvania to follow up on this lead, interviewing the witness and reviewing security footage from the shopping mall. However, the footage was too degraded to make a positive identification, and the lead ultimately proved to be another dead end. The accumulation of false leads was emotionally exhausting for the Brennan family. Each tip brought renewed hope followed by crushing disappointment when it didn't provide answers about Tommy's fate. Linda Brennan later described this period as living in limbo between hope and despair. In 1994, the case received renewed attention when it was connected to a task force investigating a potential serial predator who might have been active in New Jersey during the early 1990s. However, this investigation eventually determined that the suspected individual had not been in the Cedar Grove area at the time of Tommy's disappearance. Meanwhile, life at Riverside Middle School had continued, though Tommy's absence was still felt by those who had known him. Coach Peterson continued to work with the soccer program, and a memorial garden was established near the school's main entrance in Tommy's honor. The school district had also implemented new safety procedures following Tommy's disappearance, including improved supervision of students during after-school activities and enhanced background checks for all employees and volunteers who worked with children. Frank Carlson, the maintenance worker who had been investigated in connection with Tommy's disappearance, had left his position with the school district in 1991 and moved to another state. While he had never been charged with any crime related to Tommy's case, investigators had maintained periodic contact with him to monitor his activities. In 1995, 5 years after Tommy's disappearance, Detective Mitchell was preparing to retire from the Cedar Grove Police Department. Before leaving, she decided to conduct a final, comprehensive review of Tommy's case file to ensure that nothing had been overlooked during the investigation. Mitchell's review included examining all physical evidence, re-interviewing key witnesses, and checking for any new developments in forensic science that might be applicable to the case. She was particularly interested in areas of the school that might not have been thoroughly searched during the initial investigation. Coach Peterson, who had worked closely with investigators since Tommy's disappearance, offered to assist Mitchell in reviewing any aspects of the case related to the school's athletic facilities. Peterson had intimate knowledge of the school building and had often wondered if there were areas that might have been missed during the original search. During their review of the school's layout, Peterson mentioned that there were several maintenance areas in the basement that were rarely accessed except for specific repair work. Some of these areas had been sealed or locked since the school's construction and might not have been thoroughly examined during the 1990 investigation. Mitchell was intrigued by the possibility that evidence might still exist in areas of the school that had been overlooked. She decided to conduct a systematic search of all basement areas, including storage rooms and maintenance spaces that might have been missed 5 years earlier. It was during this final review that Coach Peterson would make the discovery that would finally solve Tommy Brennan's disappearance. The evidence had been hidden in plain sight for 5 years, waiting in a forgotten corner of the school where Tommy had spent his final hours. The locker that Peterson found would contain not only answers about Tommy's fate, but also evidence that would expose a truth that was far more shocking than anyone had imagined. The case was about to be solved in the most unexpected way possible. Underscore 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 Chapter 4: The Forgotten Locker. October 12, 1995 was a gray autumn day when Coach William Peterson arrived at Riverside Middle School to begin the systematic review of basement areas that he had discussed with Detective Mitchell. Peterson had been thinking about the conversation for weeks and was determined to check every possible location where evidence might have been overlooked. The school's basement contained a maze of storage rooms, utility areas, and maintenance spaces that had accumulated clutter and forgotten equipment over the years. Peterson had worked at the school for 8 years and was familiar with most of these areas, but even he admitted that some corners of the basement were rarely visited. Peterson began his search in the areas closest to the main building entrance, working systematically through each room and storage space. He was looking for anything that might be connected to Tommy's disappearance: clothing, personal items, or any signs that someone had been in these areas during September 1990. At approximately 2:30 p.m., while examining a storage area near the building's heating system, Peterson noticed a maintenance locker that he couldn't remember ever seeing opened. The locker was located in a corner that was partially hidden by utility pipes and appeared to have been undisturbed for a considerable time. The locker was secured with an old padlock that showed signs of corrosion and wear. However, what immediately caught Peterson's attention was that the lock appeared to be newer than the locker itself, suggesting that it had been installed sometime after the locker's original use. Peterson examined the locker more closely and noticed that dust patterns around the base suggested it hadn't been moved or accessed in several years. The area around the locker was cramped and required crawling through a narrow space to reach, which would explain why it might have been missed during previous searches. Recognizing that the locker could potentially contain evidence, Peterson decided not to open it himself, but to contact Detective Mitchell immediately. He carefully documented the locker's location with photographs and measurements, then left the area undisturbed while waiting for investigators to arrive. Detective Mitchell responded to Peterson's call within an hour, bringing with her evidence collection equipment and a bolt cutter to remove the padlock. She was intrigued by Peterson's description of the locker's location and the fact that it appeared to have been secured separately from other storage areas. The area where the locker was located required investigators to crawl through a tight space between utility pipes, which would have made it nearly impossible to find during a casual search. The location suggested that whoever had used the locker had specifically chosen it because it would be unlikely to be discovered. When Mitchell cut the padlock and opened the locker, she found contents that would immediately solve Tommy Brennan's 5-year-old disappearance. Inside the locker were Tommy's missing backpack, his soccer bag, and his school identification card, all carefully stored and preserved. More disturbing was the discovery of a detailed journal that documented someone's obsession with Tommy and other students at the school. The journal contained photographs of Tommy and other children, detailed notes about their schedules and activities, and entries that described planning to spend time with selected students. The journal's entries were dated from August 1990 through September 1990, covering the period leading up to Tommy's disappearance. The final entry, dated September 18, 1990, described approaching Tommy after soccer practice and convincing him to come to the basement to help with equipment. The journal revealed that Tommy had been lured to the basement by someone he trusted, where he had been killed and his body hidden in another location. The killer had kept Tommy's belongings as souvenirs, while creating the appearance that Tommy had simply vanished from the parking lot. Detective Mitchell immediately contacted the FBI and the prosecutor's office to report the discovery. The locker's contents provided the first concrete evidence in Tommy's case and suggested that his killer had been someone with access to the school building and knowledge of its layout. The journal's handwriting was compared to samples from school personnel records, focusing particularly on individuals who had been employed at the school in 1990. The analysis revealed that the handwriting matched that of Frank Carlson, the maintenance worker who had been investigated and cleared during the original investigation. However, when investigators attempted to locate Carlson, they discovered that he had died in a car accident in 1993, 2 years after leaving his position at the school district. This explained why the locker had remained undisturbed. Only Carlson had known of its existence and location. The investigation revealed that Carlson had used his position as a maintenance worker to identify potential victims and plan his crimes. He had access to all areas of the school building and could move around the campus without arousing suspicion from students or staff. The journal entries showed that Carlson had been watching Tommy for weeks before approaching him on September 18th. He had studied Tommy's schedule, identified when he would be vulnerable, and planned exactly how to isolate him from potential witnesses. On the day of Tommy's disappearance, Carlson had approached the boy in the parking lot and convinced him to return to the school to help move some equipment. Tommy, who knew Carlson as a school employee, had trusted him and followed him into the building. The journal's final entries described how Carlson had killed Tommy in the basement and disposed of his body in a remote location outside the school district. He had then placed Tommy's belongings in the hidden locker as a twisted memorial to his crime. The discovery also explained why the search dogs had lost Tommy's scent in the parking lot. Tommy had indeed left the area, but he had returned to the school with Carlson rather than leaving the campus entirely. The location of Tommy's body was described in the journal, leading investigators to a wooded area approximately 10 miles from the school where Carlson had buried the boy's remains. The recovery of Tommy's body finally provided his family with the closure they had sought for 5 years. The revelation that Tommy had been killed by a school employee who had passed background checks was shocking to the Cedar Grove community. The case prompted significant changes in how educational institutions screen employees and monitor access to school facilities. Chapter 5. Justice and Closure. The discovery of Frank Carlson's journal and Tommy Brennan's belongings in the hidden maintenance locker provided investigators with a complete picture of the crime that had haunted Cedar Grove for 5 years. While Carlson's death in 1993 meant that he could never be prosecuted, the evidence finally gave Tommy's family the answers they had desperately sought. Detective Mitchell immediately coordinated with the FBI to analyze all evidence found in the locker and to verify the information contained in Carlson's journal. The detailed entries provided specific locations and dates that could be cross-referenced with other evidence from the original investigation. The journal revealed that Carlson had been planning to target Tommy for several weeks before September 18, 1990. He had used his access to school records to learn about Tommy's schedule and had observed the boy's after-school routines to identify the best opportunity to approach him. Carlson's writings showed a disturbing pattern of obsession with several students at Riverside Middle School, though Tommy appeared to have been his primary target. The journal entries described elaborate fantasies about spending time with children and detailed plans for isolating them from supervision. The investigation revealed that Carlson had approached Tommy in the school parking lot just as the boy was walking to meet his mother. Using his authority as a school employee, Carlson had convinced Tommy to return to the building to help move some athletic equipment from the basement. Tommy, who had been taught to respect adults and had no reason to fear a school employee, had followed Carlson into the building willingly. The timing had been carefully planned to occur after most staff had left for the day, but before Tommy's mother would become concerned about his absence. According to the journal, Carlson had taken Tommy to the remote basement area where the locker was located. In that isolated location, Carlson had killed the boy and then spent considerable time deciding how to dispose of the body while creating the impression that Tommy had simply vanished. The journal described how Carlson had transported Tommy's body to a wooded area in nearby Morris County, where he had buried the remains in a location he believed would never be discovered. He had then returned to the school and secured Tommy's belongings in the hidden locker. Using the information from Carlson's journal, investigators located Tommy's burial site on October 15, 1995. The remains were found exactly where Carlson had described, confirming the accuracy of his written confession and finally allowing Tommy's family to lay their son to rest. The forensic examination of Tommy's remains confirmed that he had died from blunt force trauma, consistent with Carlson's description of events in his journal. The examination also revealed that Tommy had died quickly, providing some small comfort to his family. The investigation into Carlson's background revealed disturbing information that had not been uncovered during his original employment screening. He had been fired from previous positions for inappropriate behavior around children, but these incidents had not been properly documented or reported to authorities. Most significantly, investigators discovered that Carlson had been suspected in the disappearance of another child in Pennsylvania in 1987, but had never been charged due to lack of evidence. The case had been closed without resolution, and the information had not been shared with New Jersey authorities when Carlson was hired. The revelation that multiple children might have been victimized by Carlson prompted investigators to review unsolved missing children cases in all locations where he had lived and worked. This review led to potential connections to several other disappearances, though definitive proof was difficult to establish years after the crimes. The Brennan family's reaction to the discovery was complex, combining relief at finally having answers with grief over the confirmation that Tommy had been murdered. Linda Brennan said in a statement, "While nothing can bring Tommy back, knowing the truth allows us to finally begin healing and to ensure that his death was not in vain." The case prompted significant changes in how school districts conduct background checks and monitor employees who have access to children. New procedures were implemented requiring more thorough screening of all personnel and better communication between educational institutions about problematic employees. Coach Peterson, who had discovered the hidden locker, was praised for his persistence in ensuring that every possible location was searched. His dedication to finding answers about Tommy's disappearance had ultimately led to the breakthrough that solved the case. The Tommy Brennan case became a landmark in missing children investigations, demonstrating the importance of thoroughly searching all areas where evidence might be hidden and the need for improved background screening procedures for individuals who work with children. The case also highlighted the vulnerability of children to predators who use positions of authority and trust to gain access to victims. Tommy's story became part of educational programs designed to teach children about recognizing potentially dangerous situations while maintaining appropriate trust in legitimate authority figures. In 1996, the Brennan family established the Tommy Brennan Foundation, which provides funding for improved background checks in educational settings and supports families of missing children. The foundation has helped prevent similar tragedies and has assisted other families dealing with missing loved ones. The hidden maintenance locker at Riverside Middle School was permanently sealed after the evidence was removed, and a memorial plaque was installed in Tommy's honor. The school also implemented new security procedures to ensure that all areas of the building are regularly monitored and that no spaces remain unsupervised. Frank Carlson's death in 1993 had prevented him from facing justice for his crimes, but the discovery of his journal ensured that the truth about Tommy's disappearance would finally be known. The case served as a reminder that even when perpetrators escape prosecution, persistent investigation can still provide answers and closure for victims' families. underscore 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 final words. The resolution of Tommy Brennan's case in 1995 marked the end of one of New Jersey's most heartbreaking missing child investigations. The discovery of Frank Carlson's hidden locker provided answers that had eluded investigators for 5 years and finally allowed Tommy's family to find peace. The case led to fundamental changes in how educational institutions screen employees and monitor access to school facilities. The Tommy Brennan Child Protection Act, passed by the New Jersey legislature in 1996, established stricter background check requirements and improved information sharing between school districts. Tommy's story became a catalyst for improved missing children investigation techniques, particularly emphasizing the importance of thoroughly searching all possible locations where evidence might be concealed. The case demonstrated that persistence and systematic investigation could solve even the most challenging cases. The Brennan family's advocacy work continued for years after Tommy's case was resolved, helping other families of missing children and supporting legislative efforts to improve child protection. Their foundation has provided assistance to hundreds of families and has helped prevent similar tragedies through improved safety procedures. Coach Peterson continued to work at Riverside Middle School until his retirement in 2005, always remembering Tommy and the importance of never giving up the search for truth. His discovery of the hidden locker remained one of the most significant breakthroughs in missing person investigation history. Today, Tommy Brennan's legacy lives on through the safety procedures and protection measures that were implemented following his case. His story serves as a reminder that the search for missing children must never end, and that answers can sometimes be found in the most unexpected places, waiting patiently for someone persistent enough to keep looking.